Last night's big wind and rainstorm made a decision for me. This is a trial of sorghum or Sudan grass with peas and fava beans that I'm gonna use the Mulchatron on. So this video, I'll describe what the Mulchatron is, where I found the idea, a brilliant idea, and we'll see how it goes. First step is, because this all got knocked over by the wind, I'm going to scythe it in place. This is, I forget exactly, 1, 2, it's about 15 feet across width. The idea being that I'm gonna probably put one row of crop down the center. Well, it'll be a triple row, but one, well, we'll talk about it in detail. I just wanted to get this video before I started scything. Here's the before picture. Okay, 25 minutes, done. Just the grass blade. Now I'll come back down in a few minutes and do a full explanation of what's gonna happen here. Excuse the rumbling in the background. There's some leaks packing going on. This is one of the most exciting moments in my history as a farmer. And this is called the Mulchatron. This is a device that was invented by my teacher, Scott Hall. He's a syntropic agriculture teacher and just a phenomenal course, highly recommended. And this little test plot of Sudan grass, as you can see, has been cut and windrowed. And I'll just say that this is very suboptimal. Obviously, your cover crop getting blown down to the ground is not awesome, but in this case, it's fine. It was close enough. It had enough biomass to do what we want. But the organization is very challenging. Scything when something's on the ground is hard. Sickle bar mowing can work, or it can be a problem. And then once it's down, it's harder to organize. The best would be to cut so that you can grab big bunches of stems in your hand, and that's sort of not happening. But so we lost some organization, but we're getting it back with the Mulchatron. But ideally, you lose less, and this could be, all the stems would be on the bottom, placed first and going up. Anyway, back up for a second. What we're doing here is we're taking this 15-foot wide cover crop, which is Sudan grass, peas, field peas, and fava beans. We've cut it, and this was a cover crop that was planted into loose worked ground. So tilled the soil, planted this cover crop. Now what we're doing is we're taking the 15 feet of cover crop biomass and we're concentrating it into one bed here. This is a setup that can either do 1 row or 3 rows. And so we're just doing the middle row. And what's happening is, this is just literally a piece of wood to connect 3 runners. And it creates these spaces where we pack in the biomass like that, get it nice and full, and then this just goes on top to pin the cover crop in place. If it's loose, you can pack it with that, but this is wet Sudan grass, no need to pack it. And you just pull this forward. And what that does, my voice is cracking from the excitement. It allows us to get a very even mulch block. And right here, we have an open planting row with no confusing mulch going all over the place. I can still see my tape down there. And we have here a 6-inch, true 6-inch deep deposition of wet, thick sorghum from 7.5 feet on this side, 7.5 feet on this side. That's all here. So what's going to happen under here It also rained last night, so this is wet as can be, and the ground underneath is going to be extremely alive with decomposition. This is sort of the opposite of making hay. It was cut this morning, and in another hour or two, it's all going to be organized into these lines. And then the center line will be planted out right away, later today, with all kinds of annuals, and next season I'll plant the perennials. If I had planned it out a little bit better, I could have done perennials in here as well, but for right now, it's just going to be the annuals. We've also I cut sort of high, so all these sorghum stems are going to grow back faster than the weeds, so we could get almost as much biomass another time before the end of the season. And we'll bank that up on the sides of this. But this is a very simple device that is absolutely brilliant, and I'm going to do a little bit more, and then I'll talk about some of the implications of why am I so excited about this, some of the implications of this little device. So it's a little bit, well, it's all green now. It's not all going to be green for long. Once we have, today's going to get to 95 degrees, so it'll look a little different. But wanted to talk a little bit more about this thing and why I'm so amazingly excited about it. It looks like it's super labor intensive and not a lot of work, not a lot of bed space. However, it's completely scalable, can be made to be super efficient, and the bed space issue I'll talk about in a second. So the first thing that jumps out is, okay, we've got a 15-foot wide garden, and we're going to concentrate that all into one bed and plant one single row or a triple row of veggies. Meaning, where a normal farm would have 3 beds of productions every 5 feet on center or something like that, we'll only have 1, and then we'll have biomass. So yes, in that sense, it's inefficient because we're losing field space that we could be producing veggies with. But of course, the answer there is this is input neutral, or no inputs at all. So we can, and there's a lot of ways to do this. Yes, here the soil was worked, but this eventually could be, the mulch producing areas could be perennial C4 bunch grasses, and instead of annuals, so that you're not tilling there. And but we're losing some of the field, we're quote unquote losing some of the field to biomass. And I would argue that if you're not doing this and you're trying to produce veggies, you either need to be bare ground and cultivate, or you need to bring in biomass from somewhere else. So we're not net losing biomass, just losing field space. We're just losing field space in our production system. But on the whole, it breaks even because we're not importing biomass now. The other thing is this, with super high efficient biomass crops, you can get it to a ratio of 2 to 1 instead of 3 to 1. So every other bed you could be quote unquote losing. But we're actually improving the soil in the biomass rows and in the veggie rows, rather than robbing one or both, as most veggies operations, mine included, do. So this is truly, to me, this is like the no-till answer. You can crimp rye and plant right into it. That's one answer, but that really doesn't always cover the soil. A lot of people have problems with crimping and not getting enough coverage, and then weeds coming up. That's pretty standard, actually. And roller crimping, most of that is done with conventional systems that can use herbicides. Organic no-till roller crimping is a wonderful, amazing solution. Might not work so well for horticultural crops. This is the horticultural answer for regenerative biomass on site, in situ, highly organized and efficient. So, of course, I'm doing this all by hand solo. This is meant to be for 2 people, but it could definitely be mechanized. So one important thing is to mow. So after I mowed, I flipped the grass to the one side. So I just cut the grass, mowed it, and then raked everything to the side. So I made 2 windrows, one here, it's kind of hard to see, and one here. So this is all the grass from there to here and from the middle to here. So this is a windrow of grass, that's a windrow of grass. Now, that could easily all be done with a sickle bar mower and a hay rake. But instead of like letting the hay dry, we're cutting it and putting it in the windrow immediately because we want to keep every bit of moisture in. This whole thing is to cut and keep the moisture in, so only the top is going to ever dry out. The middle and the bottom of the grass is just going to rot and decompose and release nutrients, turn into soil, mulch, provide habitat, provide lots of food, all the good things. Sorry, I keep getting interrupted. So, couple issues to address are that, of course, one of the biggest benefits here is that we're going to cut this material and it's just going to come right back. It's Sudan grass. Normally, you mow this once or twice in the season. So that's what we're doing here. The Sudan grass is going to absolutely jump back from these relatively high cuts super fast. And they are going to do that as well right in the row that I'm not mulching. So that'll be a problem just for me here. It's a little bit silly. But you can imagine that in the future, if I'm able to make one of these that goes behind a tractor, the tractor will be up there. You'll have 2 windrows of material raked to the side, and the tractor will have a coulter with a single or triple chisel, and then the soil in right where these are going to pass will be disturbed. So you'll do like a micro tillage right in the planting row. I mean, a chisel with a 2-inch chisel on it, a coulter in front to cut nice and smooth, and then a 2-inch chisel will leave a nice little planting strip for veggie transplants, garlic, whatever you want to do. And then Scott Hall also, instead of the disturbance for transplanting, also has put a seeder on the front of this thing. So you literally, that has to be on obviously, ground that can accept seed. So a little bit tilled there. So this would have, like this bed, you would just till this with a rototiller or something like that after you cut the hay off, or you don't plant the hay on your veggie bed. You have the mulch on the side beds. Anyway, this could be a production veggie bed that's tilled, and then you have the seeder that gets pushed that's connected to this thing. So you're seeding in the row, and then the seed is going to be right down in this hole, in this line. Perfect moisture, perfect germination conditions, and just have a straight run to pop up through there, and then have absolutely no weed competition. You won't have to weed. So this is a completely scalable system that right now looks labor intensive, but doesn't have to be, because these are all like haying operations are some of the most mechanized stuff in agriculture. You could have a front mounted sickle bar and then come through with a hay rake, make these windrows, and then come through with your planter that has a chisel coulter, and maybe these are metal or something like that, and then the windrow of hay just needs to be put in there mechanically. I don't, or by hand. I don't know of I'm not an ag mechanic, but I'm sure someone could figure that out to pack mulch like that. Anyway, for larger horticultural operations. Either way, this is an unbelievable step forward. It's just right now some pieces of wood, but you can tell the potential here. So very exciting, and I'll definitely do some updates. Oh, one other thing is I'm leaving a little bit of the grass here. This looks like a lot, but it's not actually that much. It's just to keep a little bit of more coverage on the soil. You can see this is like what I'm leaving, and this is totally removing all the biomass. So it's, I'm leaving a substantial portion of it, maybe a fifth or a quarter. And so all these Sudan grass stems should probably jump right back up through. And so really, I mean, it's just amazing because the ground that's providing the mulch is getting massively improved. There's going to be a whole other growth pulse from the sorghum, and maybe the beans will come back, maybe not. But I can also, in a couple, well, maybe a month, maybe not even a month, I'll also be seeding rye into the sides here. So maybe even rye vetch, so that next spring I'll be able to keep these going. So that and that'll be rye vetch and a C4 perennial, probably gamma grass, because I have some nice seed from that. So this will be like a permanent, or could be a permanent biomass accumulation row on either side, always feeding this production row. I don't know if I'm going to actually do the perennial thing here. This is sort of a test plot, but I'm researching, experimenting for how to approach this on the larger field scale that we have. So anyway, this is the Mulchatron. I will link to a couple other videos to show where I got this brilliant idea, but that is the most high-tech thing I've got going on the entire farm. Finished product. Amazing. We should get excellent regrowth and everything you could ever want out of mulching. It's very different to mulch with green manure than it is to mulch with brown materials. We're locking in the moisture. They're bioactive. It's going to be a completely different process of decomposition compared to putting on like old hay or something like that. This is going to be humming with life much more quickly, and it's going to break down much more thoroughly and fast, which is why we need to have a constant supply of this biomass in between the production rows. So final thought here. One may ask, why not just cut the hay or whatever biomass you have and windrow it and then plant into that? There's nothing wrong with that. I've done that many times. But although you're putting in a lot more effort to organize the mulch up front, you end up with a lot of savings in the long run. A lot of things are like that, where you work a little bit more up front than you'd like to at the moment, but you save it and then some as time goes on. The very clean line, it's hard to see here actually. This is the edge of the mulch row, and then this is the biomass. And that clean line means ease of management. So I can come in, whether it's by hand with a scythe, once the sorghum regrows, or I can come in with a sickle bar mower or a lawn mower, whatever it is that you're using, or grazing. You could put a temporary fence up there and mow it or graze it. Whatever you're doing, having the clean line between the two, the interface between one management system and the next, allows for just farm efficiencies. You just, in a big pile of hay mulch, the line isn't always so clear, and it just makes management more challenging. So there's that. And then you get to set the depth with this thing, so you know you're putting on the same packed thickness of mulch, so you're consistent. So down the row, when you're trying to produce a crop, you have more consistency, which is always important for farming. So, and then of course, the biggest one I would say is the planting. So if you just make a big pile and it's as thick as it needs to be to really stop weeds and keep moisture, which is pretty darn thick, the stems are all crisscrossed. And so when you try to get down in there to put a plant in the ground, you have a lot of work to do. You have to kind of tease apart the layers or cut it somehow. You have to figure something out. Here, it's just open. You just move it aside, and there you can see, I don't know if you can see that. Oh, see my tape measure. And there's the bare ground. So you just plant into that with a hori or as I said, you could mechanize that with a transplanter, or it's already sown because there's a seeder in front of the mulcher. And, if you really wanted to at this point, for a veggie operation, you could bring a little bit of compost and throw the compost in there and then plant into super low compost if you were trying to increase the fertility of your soil. If it's already at a place where you don't need the compost, then great. If you do need the compost, put it right in there. 1 wheelbarrow full, maybe 2, would probably fill this whole trench. So it's a very effective deployment of compost. And then, a lot of no-till farms I see, they put compost on top. They don't mulch the top of the beds, and then they have to work it. And so you just have compost oxidizing all year long. Here, the compost would be protected by a huge, thick wad of decomposing moist grasses, which it would provide microbiology diversity to the grass to break it down even faster and get more nutrients available to the plant. Anyway, what an incredibly elegant, simple, and incredibly effective and important innovation for the kind of production that we want, where we're not exposing soil and we're not bringing in inputs from other places, whether that be mulch, fertility, you name it. This is the way forward, I think, for the zero input farming that a lot of us are dreaming of. I should also add that, of course, I'm doing this with grass, but you can do this with anything, any material. I mean, you could go into this brush here and start cutting tree limbs, put the big limbs in the bottom of the container, and then fill it up with finer stuff on the top. And that would be that'd be a little crazy. But what I'm trying to say is that you can do this with big chunks of wood on the bottom, cover it with finer stuff, grass on top, whatever, to seal the moisture in. And that's really the key, is that larger, heavier duty stuff should be in contact with the ground, and then covered to cap it with to keep the moisture in. These big stalks are on the top here. That's not ideal, because when I do this at scale, I'm going to come through with a sickle bar mower. And what a sickle bar mower does is, as I move this way and cut this way, all the stems get cut and lay back this way. So all the stems would be facing that direction. So I would start over at the end where those stems are laying on top, and I would work that way, if that makes sense. So the stems would be in contact with the ground and the tops would be farther back. Hard to explain a little bit, much easier to visualize while I'm doing it, but I did this by myself and I filmed it by myself as usual. So unfortunately I can't do much in the way of action shots, but the end result, now that things dried down a little bit, is pretty darn clear and really awesome. Of course, it takes a lot of material to get there with this, and this is why you really need to plant ideally very, very high biomass production cover crops or pasture species or whatever to do this, because this is how much it took from there to there to get just this bed mulched to the depth that we need it to have complete all-season weed suppression, moisture control, everything. If I tried to fit 2 beds in here, I'd have to reduce this mulch by half, and then it really, more vigorous weeds might be able to pop through. We might not, if we had a long drying stretch, we might not get all the moisture retention that we want. So this is the ratio right now. So the more biomass your cover crop puts on, the better you can get that ratio, 3 to 1, 2 to 1 in the absolute best of cases.